Spartans and Helots, two opposing classes of one ancient Lacedaemonian society. The former were free, but subject to strict military rules. The latter were dependent on them, had no civil rights, but also had no civil obligations. A whole bunch of literature is devoted to their relations, from educational books by Paul Cartledge to fiction by Stephen Marlowe. You might think that everything is already known about the Helots and their position. Alas, this is not so. Ancient evidence about the Helots is fragmentary, few, and often contradictory. Despite the fact that violent exploitation was well known in ancient Greece, the authors of the Hellenistic period were confused in defining the status of the Helots, sometimes equating them with slaves, sometimes calling them a kind of slaves. Apparently, the Helot class was too Lacedaemonian to understand its essence. For representatives of more typical slave-owning polis, the Helots are believed to have descended from the population of the cities of the southern Peloponnese conquered by the Spartans. Initially, the conquered had equal rights with the conquerors, until King Agis, father of the legislator Lycurgus, deprived them of these rights. Those who submitted became free but unequal perioeci. The inhabitants of the city of Helos rebelled and were turned into unfree Helos. As an example, it is not clear whether the inhabitants of Messenia, after the Spartans conquered this region, were considered the same Helots as the descendants of the rebellious inhabitants of Helos, or were only compared to them. The Helots were not free, since they were assigned a specific place of residence and specific work. A certain number of them lived near the sea or in the mountains, engaged in fishing and cattle breeding. But the majority were farmers who worked the land, which in turn was distributed among Spartan families. Plutarch reports that the Helots, cultivating the land for the Spartans, paid them a natural rent of barley, wine, and olive oil established in advance. Demanding a higher rent was prohibited under pain of a curse. Such a restriction was introduced to avoid stratification among the Spartans themselves. However, this is the ideal. The archaic poet Tyrtaeus said that the Helots' rent was half the harvest. In later times, individual Helot families could accumulate wealth and buy expensive hoplite ammunition to participate in war. In 223 BC, the Spartan king Cleomenes allowed 6,000 Helots to ransom themselves from captivity, and received from them the impressive sum of 500 talents. Thus, forced dependence on specific Spartan families brought the Helots closer to slaves. However, they were not. Slavery means the ownership of a person. Helots could not be sold, given as gifts, bequeathed, or freed by the owners of the allotments. Liberations occurred only through state initiative. In such cases, the Helots became free, although not quite full-fledged It is tempting to follow Strabo and consider the Helots state slaves. But the Spartan state did not trade in dependent populations, as the slave owners in Athens did. Unlike other slave owners, the Spartans recognized the religious rites of the Helots. Helots had the right to be present at the burial of Spartan kings. Although military service was the duty of free people, many ancient authors mention Helots in the Spartan army, where they served as squires, light infantry, and eventually even hoplites. Military success gave Helot men more opportunities to become neo-demodes than through ransom. The number of Helots in Sparta always exceeded the number of civilians. The Helots hated the citizens and in return received contempt, humiliation, and terror. Helots were forced to distinguish themselves from free people by wearing clothes made of dog skins and were subjected to annual floggings. Drunken Helots were a humiliating example for Spartan youth, demonstrating the harm of drunkenness. The most cruel in the relations between Spartans and Helots were the cryptotoias. After the earthquake and revolt of 464 BC, the Spartan ephors declared war on the Helots every year. It was carried out by the hands of Spartan youth who, armed with short swords, carried out attacks at night, often targeting the healthiest and strongest helots. Terror existed even before the introduction of the cryptotoi as practice. Thus, Thucydides wrote that during the unsuccessful war with Athens, the Spartans, frightened by the audacity of the numerous young helots, selected 2,000 men who considered themselves the most capable in military affairs and promised them freedom. However, in the end, they were all killed, and no one knew the circumstances of their deaths. Spartan cruelty towards the helots reveals their real status within Lacedaemonian society. The helots were not simply an exploited class, but a necessary element in the functioning of the unique Spartan state. The reforms organized by Lycurgus turned Sparta into an effective military mechanism, but the life of full citizens there was associated with numerous deprivations, restrictions, and the risk of death during compulsory military service. In order to feel like people of high status, the Spartans needed their opposite, the unfree and oppressed, a kind of scapegoats. When the life of the military machine faltered due to military losses among citizens, the helots were a necessary resource for replenishing the army. In the end, protracted wars with the Achaean League and Macedonia forced the Spartan rulers to make concessions. Around the beginning of the 2nd century BC, the Spartan king Nabis freed the helots, transferring to them cultivated lands and civil rights. The 1,000-year era of subjugation and humiliation was over.
If you enjoy our short informative video, click like and subscribe. Do not miss our upcoming videos. We may be a bit awkward, but we always manage to have a good time and find joy in the little things.